Welcome back. Just about the bottom of the hour. So we've got some new reporting first here on MS Now about the brutally demanding conditions that service members are facing overseas as we wait for some resolution to the war with Iran. MS Now spoke with a dozen family members and sailors and Marines aboard the USS Abraham Lincoln, who say they're extremely concerned about the morale, safety, and conditions on that ship. The 5,000-person crew has been at sea for 9 straight months and engaged in combat operations since the beginning of the war against Iran all the way back in February. Many family members describe their kids or spouses telling them about non-operational toilets, moldy showers, laundry facilities that were broken for weeks, and extended periods with no hot water for showering. The families say their loved ones have described food shortages and standing in line at the ship's store for an hour or more, even while it often lacks basic supplies like toothpaste, soap, and deodorant. Let's bring in MS Now Pentagon reporter Priya Sridhar, who broke that story. Former acting Army Secretary Patrick Murphy also back with us. Priya, it's a great story. People think about service members, in this case sailors, in a combat zone. They, of course, think about the dangers the enemy may pose. They perhaps think less about just the conditions they have to live with each and every day, sounding, from your reporting, downright miserable and at times maybe even dangerous.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And, you know, the Lincoln just set a record in the Navy for having the most continuous days at sea, with more than 200 days underway. They left San Diego in November. They had a brief stop in Guam in December, and then they didn't stop for a port call again until early July, just briefly in Oman, where most of the sailors were able to get off the ship, but they had to stay in port. And really what the families were telling me is they're very worried about exhaustion here. Most of their family members are working 12 to 14-hour shifts. They're depending on their job. They're not getting any days off. And when you talk about a flight deck on an aircraft carrier, this is one of the most dangerous places in the military. You're having high-speed aircraft taking off and landing. You have munitions, weapons, and bombs being moved around at a very fast pace. And the service members are also being exposed to, you know, really loud noises for a sustained period of time, which can really lead to long-term injuries like hearing loss. So when you're talking about exhaustion, when you're talking about low morale, because now this deployment has been extended for a second time and there's no end in sight, they're worried that those things could lead to accidents that could potentially even be deadly. I want you to take a listen to what some of them told me.
They didn't choose to be there. They volunteered to be there. They're willing to be there, and they're doing their best. So they want our support. And part of that support means we have to have the tools to do our job. That means the fuel. That means the food, right? That means the food. That means the toothpaste and the deodorant. That means all of it, right? Now,
I don't think it's the ship is the issue. I think it's our president. It's our government that's not helping the morale. I think the ship is doing what they can do with what they're given. But I think our government needs to be doing more for our military that's sitting over there.
And so, you know, you're hearing from them about exhaustion, but they're saying that, you know, even at the end of their shifts, the fact that these sailors and Marines can't take showers, they can't wash their uniforms. I had some family members tell me that they believe that prisoners and inmates in jail are treated with more dignity and respect than our service members.
So, Patrick, let's get your take on this. What does this tell you about Pete Hegseth's military?
Listen, we're stretched pretty thin, and it's not just, I mean, Priya did a great job in his reporting. Jonathan, the one point she made in her article, which I like to highlight, there's over 10,000 shorties off the USS Lincoln. I mean, you know, in the Pentagon, we used to say, amateurs talk strategy, experts talk logistics. The USS Lincoln is the logistics machine there in the Middle East, you know, pushing out these sorties every day. And it is a very dangerous, you know, job. And these are the ultimate warriors, whether you're a sailor or a soldier. The fact is that you are doing really tough jobs. And so my heart and thoughts and prayers are going out to these sailors and their families. I know they've been extended twice. They're stretched pretty thin right now.
And this is not a new boat. The ship launched in the 80s. Priya, talk to us. It was also a conflict with no real end in sight. Like there's, negotiations off and on. Every so often the president, authorizes some sort of strike. They could be there for a long time to come.
Yeah, and that's something I heard repeatedly from the families as well, is that, they understand that their loved ones volunteered to be in the military, right? They're not expecting to be on a Carnival cruise here. They don't expect buffets. They don't expect, a hot tub. They understand that the conditions are going to be rough. They signed up to go to war. But I think what's lacking here is any clear strategy. And they said, we're ready to do a mission and complete a mission. But what we're failing to understand is what this mission actually is and when is it going to end. So I think really what they're looking for is some goalpost that, they can keep an eye on and some relief at the end of all of this. We had 3 aircraft carriers simultaneously in the Middle East, which hasn't, you haven't seen a military buildup like that since 2003. And this has been a war that has largely been fought by the Navy. When you think about who's been imposing the naval blockade in the Strait of Hormuz and who's been launching those airstrikes on Iran. And so, they say enough talk about the stockpiles and the depletion of weapons and the $67 billion that Secretary Hegseth has gone to the Hill to ask for. Let's talk about our service members.
Priya Sridhar, thank you so much for bringing this reporting to us. Great work. Patrick Murphy, thank you as well. We appreciate you both.
Hi there, everyone. It's 4 o'clock in the East. With the midterms just 90 days away now, voters are practically shouting from the rooftops that what they want more than anything is relief from Donald Trump's economy. As voters headed to the polls last night in Michigan, their anger over the Trump economy was one of the main drivers of their choices regarding who to vote for. 18% of Democratic primary voters listed the economy as the main motivating factor for their vote, nearly tied with opposition to Donald Trump and the Republican Party. It is a frustration that the presumptive Democratic nominee for Michigan Senate, Abdul El-Sayed, highlighted in his victory speech earlier today after pulling off a razor-thin victory in the Senate primary. Watch.
Like me, that you ought to be able to afford your groceries. If you believe like me, that you ought to be able to afford your home. If you believe like me, that your tax dollars ought to be invested in you rather than sent somewhere else. If you believe like me, that you ought to have the guarantee of good health care in this country without some corporation trying to tell you what you cannot have and should not fight for, I hope that you'll join this movement now.
Now, despite the overwhelming evidence that what was once Donald Trump's top political issue is now a boost for Democrats, Donald Trump is still campaigning hard on his economic record as if it is some sort of political asset to him and his embattled party. He's heading to Las Vegas today to champion his economic policies, even as that city struggles under his tariff regime and rising prices due to inflation and the war in Iran. All the while, Trump is demanding that voters give him credit and good grades for the struggles they're facing in their own households. Watch.
I don't know. Then they say in the economy, Trump is at 42%. I shouldn't be at 40. We have the greatest economy maybe in the history of the world for any country. We've done a great job. I think we should be given an A+ on the economy, but I think that's coming. People are starting to talk about it.
What people? Maybe Elon. Trump might want to actually talk to some of his own voters. Here's how they grade Donald Trump.
I'm curious if you could give him a letter grade overall handling of the economy.
F. If I could go lower than F, I would.
Right now, D-, F.
An F.
An F.
Yeah.
And you were quick on that. Why?
Well, before he got voted, he was saying a lot of things that we were promised to get, and where's all that? And it still hasn't even happened. And he's still saying all this, which maybe might happen, but hardly it ever happens. So I just never see nothing good from him.
Donald Trump refusing to face the reality about voters' anger with his ailing economy, imperiling his party's chances in November's midterm elections, is where we start today with some of our favorite experts and friends. Puck News senior political columnist and national affairs analyst John Heilemann is back. Also back with us, Media Matters for America President Angelo Carusone is here. And the host of the Fast Politics podcast, contributing writer for the New York Times, Molly Jong-Fast is back. Heilemann, what do you make of not just where Trump's numbers are. I mean, I part of me thinks they're actually higher than they should be. 34% is still a third of the country that approves of soaring inflation and a deeply unpopular war in Iran, and tariffs that are still inexplicable to most people. But what do you make of how the economy is driving people to the Democratic Party? It's a real about face. How many are on mute? You got to unmute. Oh, how many got to stop and unmute? Start over. Take two. How many still can't hear you. I'm going to send the question. Is it there? All right. Angelo, your thoughts.
I mean, look, it's reality, right? I mean, that's ultimately what it boils down to. He has been selling a story about promises, and you heard it from that one voter. I mean, they were talking about 5-6% economic growth. They were making all these claims about, a new golden age, which he's still hanging on to. But at the end of the day, people are feeling it in their pockets. You can't avoid the consequences of the bad decisions and bad policies they put in place. And then there's something else on top of it. I think he would have a lot more benefit of the doubt amongst his own people, even with all the bad stuff and the harm that he's caused, if he also didn't, while creating those effects, consistently tell everybody how much he doesn't actually care about their situation, how much he's focused on all these other random things. And even when the concept of affordability comes up and he's bragging about a golden age of America, he calls it fake, that it's made up by Democrats, even though his own people are explaining this. Even candidates are now worried, Republican candidates, about affordability. So that's the lay of the land. He's sort of making it worse for himself with his own policies and calcifying it with his own conduct and behavior and communications.
Hellman, I think you're back with us. There is this tendency, I think, to separate out stories about the economy from stories about corruption and grift. But for voters, they've collapsed onto themselves, right? Like what they are dealing with is every time they drive past the gas station, to say nothing of filling up their cars, every time they go to the grocery store or to Walmart or to Target, everything is more expensive. And then the total of everything they buy regularly is significantly higher than it was a year ago and 2 years ago. But every time they turn on the TV or look at any news from Washington, Trump is painting something gold.
Yes, and I just want to say, Nicole, I think maybe the thing that people have been trying to do to me my entire life, which is mute me, you finally got that to happen on the show.
Never
I don't really understand how it happened, but it happened. First time, like half the people in my life are like, where's that button? Let's find that button. I'll have it on all the time. I think, the economy is not good. It's been objectively not good throughout Donald Trump's presidency. And he ran on the economy, as we all know. We've talked about this a million times, in 2024. It's the biggest miracle is the fact that people who are around Trump somehow got him to focus on the economy in 2024 when, as has become abundantly clear throughout these first 18 months or whatever it's been of Trump 2.0, he doesn't care about the economy as it affects anyone except him in his personal economy, right? He cares about making himself as rich as possible. That is all Trump 2.0 is about. That is 75% of it, and 25% of it is retribution against his enemies. He does not care. And you see the reporting from, if you go back and really look at the 2024 campaign, you realize that it was like he didn't care about the economy then either. And he says it to people openly. He says, the economy bores me. I don't know what he's going to say in Nevada tonight, but if it's anything like what he has said every time else he's gone out on the campaign trail to talk about the economy, it has been clear that he's not invested in it, doesn't care about it, has no real sense of what's going on in the world, and more kind of the other thing he was bored by and doesn't care about is the fate of the Republican Party. And so he's worse than being disengaged with it. He mocks it in what his statements are. It says affordability is a hoax and it's a witch hunt, or it's a hoax, it's a fairy tale. Democrats at the media making it up. Republican, my economy is the best in the world. I don't think he believes any of that because I don't think he thinks about this all day. He thinks about all day the renovation projects. I think Maggie Haberman said in an interview the other day that she thought 70% of Trump's mindset, of his mind share, is now on renovating things, building monuments to himself, anything that's like a building project that is designed to kind of, in his mind, not allow history to erase him when he's gone is 3/4 of the mindset, and the other remaining set is about retribution. And voters can see that. Your point is he's always talking about, when he's on camera anywhere, is one of those two things. He's not talking about them. He's not talking about their lives. And the things he's done have made the problem worse. And voters may not be, the average voter may not be an absolute economic or political genius, but they are not idiots. And they can see those two things. The economy sucks. No one in the White House cares about me or is doing anything about it. And the consequences of that, barring some unforeseen events between now and November, the consequences of that are now kind of blaring through a lot of these primary results, just in terms of what voters are telling us is motivating them to turn out. Again, the Michigan primary turnout was absolutely off the charts last night. It's because Democrats and independents are pissed, and they're going to vote in November too.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think some Republican voters are pissed too, Molly. And what confounded Democrats about Trump for 10 years has been that people's desire to have what Trump has talked a good game about, a quote, hot economy, for 10 years has been a political boon to his party, even while he's been caught on tape talking about grabbing women between the legs, even while he's had, mask off moments about the KKK and racism and extremism, even beyond January 6th. And the hubris of the Republican Party thinking that real economic despair and anxiety wouldn't come around and boomerang on them is just stunning, considering what they've sort of taken on politically, what they've tolerated from Trump. The smears against Democrats when people are literally making choices about how much gas to put in because filling up screws the weekly food and necessities budget is not something that's going to be easily smeared with the usual tricks and tropes that they trot out against Democrats.
Yeah, and it's only going to get worse because remember, the BBB has cuts to SNAP. So think about if you are a Republican voter on SNAP, of which there are many, and Donald Trump told you that you were running. I mean, there are Democrats and Republicans both on SNAP. You believed that Donald Trump was going to make things cheaper. You'll remember he ran on this thing called, there was a weave. He did the weave on bacon, how he was going to make bacon cheaper. He said it was going to make it cheaper. He gets in office. He does things that actually do the opposite. Tariffs, war in the Middle East, gas becomes more expensive. A lot of other stuff become more expensive because of the tariffs. And then you're about to lose SNAP assistance. I mean, it's just completely a very problematic split screen. And then you have Donald Trump, and he's rebuilding the helipad, right? Because he wants to move it so he can land the helicopter closer to the White House. And he's working on the reflecting pool, right? And he's fighting with his attorney general over the reflecting pool. And he's put his name up on the Kennedy Center. And now there's a tarp there. So you can't, it just feels very out of touch to see what Donald Trump is focusing on.
Who better to ask than the candidate himself? Abdul El-Sayed is the Democratic nominee for Senate for Michigan. He joins me now. Congratulations, sir.
Thank you so much, Jacob. It's like I see you in Detroit. I see you now. You're in New York. You're everywhere.
I got a lot of makeup on. I got a tired face, but I cannot imagine how tired you are. I was at your victory party last night, and the vibes were real. There are other people who are watching this very, very closely, including the Vice President of the United States, who was just asked on Fox News about your victory. Let me show you a little bit of what he had to say.
The base of the Democratic Party just wants radicals. It wants these DSA types. It wants people who hate even the idea of private property ownership. But it also, I think, tells us that that particular set of ideas is very popular in places you wouldn't expect. Because Al-Sayed, he's this guy who holds himself out as a working class hero, as a guy who's going to fight for the working class. How does he fight for the working class? By flooding his state and his country with low-wage immigrants.
In case you missed any of that, he said that the Democratic Party wants people who hate the idea of even private property ownership. It's very popular in places you wouldn't expect. Speaking of Michigan, he said you hold yourself out as a working class hero who's going to fight for the working class by flooding your state with low-wage immigrants. What's your response?
Is that Peter Thiel's boy with that Ohio charisma he's got? That guy. I think we've had enough of him. The last thing that he said that made any sense was hillbilly elegy, after he said that Donald Trump had no business being president of anything. That was the last time he made sense, and then he decided to suck up to power. But that's exactly what this is about. You've got Republicans who'll do anything for power and money, including corrupt their office, just like Mike Rogers has. For the 14 years he was serving in Congress, he took over $1 million from the pharmaceutical industry. He voted 19 times to raise prescription drug prices. And then he helped to architect the legislation that kicked off the opioid epidemic, killing nearly 600,000 people. Why? For money and power. But that's what that party's about. We're trying to get money out of politics to put money in your pocket past Medicare for All, which of course are things that people like Ohio J.D. Vance and Mike Rogers have no clue about, because they've always been in it for themselves rather than for the public.
I was looking at some of the headlines about your victory that have come out, since last night. Democrats' path unclear. Democrats licking wounds. Warning for Democrats. These are mainstream headlines about you and the victory. What's your reaction to this framing about the race?
Well, I understand if you think that the whole point here is about where the Democrats go, you might miss the fact that this is about everyday people in the state of Michigan. My goal is to get money out of politics, put money in your pocket past Medicare for All, because when I talk to Michiganders, as I have for the better part of 15 months, in their living rooms, in their basements, in their backyards, in their parks, they don't tell me about where they sit on the left-right spectrum. They're asking me about who's going to show up to make sure that I can afford my groceries, who's going to make sure that I can see a doctor when I get sick, who's going to make sure that the infrastructure that I travel, the roads and bridges, don't pop my tire every time I drive over them, and who's going to make sure my kid's school is competent. Those are the questions people are asking, and they're asking them because Donald Trump and his acolytes like Mike Rogers have done just such a piss-poor job at actually doing the thing they got elected to do. They're taking us to, another war? We've got an opportunity to actually answer their problems. That's what this movement was built on doing, and that's why I think Democrats have a real pathway forward. If you look at the numbers coming out of yesterday, Democrats voted in, 500,000 more voters? If we show up like that in November, what's that going to mean for Mike Rogers and, frankly, any of their chances?
You mentioned universal health care, Medicare for All. It's been a central part of your campaign. I would imagine there are a lot of people who are saying some version of this to you, or when you're out on the campaign trail. Congress cannot even there's no way that they're going to pass Medicare for All under this president. They can't even exercise their war powers. What do you tell those people about whether or not this is a pie-in-the-sky dream that you're going around Michigan talking about?
Well, clearly I'm a different kind of Democrat, as we just talked about. $60 million spent to try and beat me because I don't take corporate money. I'm here to actually take on the challenges that working people face. Imagine you had a Congress that actually worked for you instead of worked for the corporations in the exact same way that Mike Rogers has made it work for a very long time. I really believe that Congress can do good things. That's why I'm running, because I'd like to make it do good things. But it's going to take defeating the defeatism of Trumpism and of Mike Rogers and the kind of politics that tells us that Congress basically sits there to figure out how to make themselves rich or to enrich the corporate donor class that they have been taking orders from for a very long time.
You know, though, what Mike Rogers is going to say when you're standing on the debate stage talking about Medicare for All. He's going to say, you want to take away people's private insurance and socialized medicine, is what they always say. You're going to say what to him on that debate stage?
You know what's taking away people's private insurance? The fact that they can't afford it. The fact that the deductibles, the premiums have gotten way too high because of people like Mike Rogers, who take checks from the private insurance industry and then fail to regulate them. So they keep upping the prices on people, putting people into bankruptcy. We hold $225 billion in medical debt. I want to know what Mike Rogers wants to do about that. I want to abolish it, and I want to make sure that every single person in this country has the health care that they need and deserve.
But will you be saying on that debate stage people can keep their private insurance if they want it?
Yeah, I'm not against abolishing private insurance. I'm for guaranteeing you public insurance so that you never have to worry about what happens if you turn 26 or get a job or lose a job or turn 65 or get married or get divorced. All the ways that Mike Rogers is okay with you losing your health care in our current health care system.
It looks like today everybody seems to be coming together. But I talked to some of your voters yesterday who said that they wouldn't vote at all in November if Stevens won. To the Stevens voters who may have felt the same way about you, that they're going to sit it out because they can't get behind you, you say what to them?
Hey, this is a big tent, and I know we might not agree on everything. But I do hope that you agree with me that the things that bring us together are so much bigger than the things that might be dividing us. And that we have an opportunity to protect ourselves from an ongoing Trump administration that has enriched him, $2.2 billion personally, but also taken so much money out of our pockets. If you believe that we need to be able to make groceries affordable, we need to be able to afford housing, we need healthcare when we need it, then I hope that you'll join me in this movement to get money out of politics, put money in your pocket, pass Medicare for all. I'm grateful for Congresswoman Stevens' fight and for her support in this race. As with Senator McMorrow, we are unified in the idea that Mike Rogers should never see the inside of the U.S. Senate, and we do need to hold Donald Trump accountable, and that's exactly what I intend to do when I'm in the U.S. Senate.
Anybody who's got a phone or a television, certainly Michiganders, who might be on the fence are getting blasted with this this message right now. There's a Hassan Piker video that's out there, and I don't know if you've seen it. I ran into him yesterday, a very popular streamer. He supports you. You've campaigned together. He's a controversial guy. On a stream last night, he addressed this. It's all over Fox News. I want to play just a little bit of it for you and our audience.
Everyone being like, Abdullah's a ton of work to do mending bridges. Here's the take nuke for you, okay? You are all unbelievably Islamophobic pieces of okay? You literally called the dude a terrorist for months on end and like called him a sexist, misogynist, terrorist, bad candidate, fake doctor when he has like 2 degrees. And now you're going to sit there and be like, well, you know, you really got to come to me now. Like, what are you talking about? Do you want to win or not? Lock the in.
His words have been used against you before. They're being used against you again. He's here talking about mending bridges and basically giving you advice. I'm just paraphrasing, not necessarily to do that. What do you make of that advice? Is that helpful advice for you?
Look, he's a streamer. I'm focused on trying to win a race for Senate in Michigan. And I've been up and down my state, spent the last 15 months talking to Michiganders. And I understand that this is a very serious election and that we got to come together. You know, obviously he's got his perspective on it and he's welcome to his perspective. It's not mine. My perspective on it is that you have to ask for every vote. I've been in this work for 15 months and then I ran for office 8 years ago. And I know that a vote is a very serious thing and folks want to give it to people that they know and trust. And if we've got more trust to build, I'm looking forward to doing that. And I hope folks who trust the Congresswoman enough to vote for her now trust her endorsement of me to beat Mike Rogers. That's going to be the work that we do for the next 13 weeks. I want them to understand exactly what the contrast is between a corporatist who never saw a corporate check he didn't want and somebody who's never taken a corporate check to run a campaign and never will. We've got an opportunity to win the future here in Michigan, and we intend to do that.
Do you intend to continue to campaign with Hassan Piker?
I'm focused on campaigning in this state, all over the state. I'm not as focused on who I'm campaigning with. I'm focused on who I'm campaigning for, which is the 10 million people in the state, reaching out to them in their communities like I have for the past 15 months.
I have to ask you about this Islamophobia that is already coming in to this race. It did in the primary, but now already in the general election on day one. I want to reread what your opponent, Mike Rogers, said in particular today. He said, Abdullah isn't just another liberal. He is an extremist. Never in a million years did I think I would be running against someone who believes America deserved 9/11. I have to let you respond to that.
Well, look, Mike Rogers has no new ideas. He was in Congress, 2000 to 2015. He left Congress, made $14 million. He doesn't want to explain. His ideas are old. His perspective on politics is old. And he's going to find that people don't want that perspective anymore. So, of course, he's going to do the same thing that MAGA always does, which is try to divide us. I've been Abdul in Michigan my whole life. I'm so grateful for the way Michiganders have embraced me and my family. And I know that Michiganders are open-minded. They're big-hearted. They're less interested in how you pray than what you pray for. And we all pray for the same things. We want what's good for our kids and our families. We want clean air, clean water, healthcare we can afford. So they're going to use Islamophobia because their ideas are tired. Their economy sucks. They're taking us to war we shouldn't fight. And we have an opportunity to actually focus on bringing us together. So if he has some new ideas he'd like to talk about, I've challenged him to 5 debates. Mike, if you're watching, 5 debates, but you're a coward, so you probably won't do it.
I second your sentiment about Michiganders. It was incredible to be there yesterday. Congratulations to you. I'm sure I'll see you out there again over the course of the next several months. Michigan Democratic Senate nominee Abdul El-Sayed, thank you so much again and congratulations.
Jacob, thank you so much. And anytime in Michigan, come have a kebab with me, huh?
Oh, count me in. I'm in. See you then. Thanks.
Joining us now, New York Times correspondent who covers the Justice Department, Glenn Thrush, staff writer for The Atlantic and MS Now political analyst Ashley Parker, and MS Now senior legal reporter Lisa Rubin. Glenn, many of those details from the meeting from inside were your own reporting. Sounds like essentially an ambush of Jeanine Pirro at the White House, but she did come prepared for a fight in a way that we don't necessarily always see when it comes to allies going toe-to-toe with the president. You note that she sees her position as U.S. attorney for D.C. as a capstone rather than a stepping stone. She doesn't fear being fired, that you're fired moment like some of the others in Trump's orbit. But is she still taking a risk by crossing Trump?
The first thing I want to say is, Ashley, I own that same tie.
You have very good taste in ties, Glenn.
Well, I won't
Glad we
wear
shored
it,
that
though.
out.
Right, I won't wear it. This isn't a formal invitation. No, look, I think we're watching a reality show here, and you know, in terms of both Pirro and Trump, it should be noted, are both veterans of the reality TV show circuit. So this was a confrontation that both of them understand, both in terms of from a theatrical point of view, but also from a relationship point of view, because they've known each other basically for 4 decades. I think Pirro, let's unpack that a little bit. I think Pirro generally, I am told by people in her orbit, actually feels hurt. She felt that Trump threw her under the bus. She feels that she's taken a lot of steps that,
And boy, has she been loyal over the years.
You got it. I mean, look, she went along with a prosecution of 6 Democrats, which fell apart. She went after the guy who threw the sandwich guy at the National Guardsman. But what was remarkable about this was a bridge too far. Our reporting showed that about 10 days after she did this very rushed indictment of Hearn, she got what was known as a Brady disclosure. Thousands of documents associated with this case that her and her attorneys viewed, and she determined that she would never, ever win this case in court. But I just want to flash over to Todd Blanche for a second. I just want people to understand he's a guy in a suit with a tie, right? Standing in front of a
ties are good, as we've established.
Ties are good. Nothing wrong with ties. But nothing that he is talking about is normal. This doesn't happen. This has only started to happen now. It is not normal for the president of the United States to get involved in a case involving a U.S. attorney. It is not normal for the president of the United States to summon a U.S. attorney to the White House to decide whether or not they're going to get fired or not. Barack Obama gave a famous speech to the U.S. attorneys saying that while he sought to influence the department, he would never interfere with their work. And also, one other thing that Todd Blanche said at this news conference today, he said that he does not personally intercede with U.S. attorneys. That is not the case. Right after he took over, Blanche and his deputy, Emile Beauvais, forced the Southern District of New York, where Blanche and Beauvais worked, to drop the case against Eric Adams. So none of what we're looking at here is normal. It might be normal in the Trump universe, but it is not normal in the universe of the Department of Justice.
I don't think any of us think it's normal that we're continuing to talk about the reflecting pool, but here we are. Glenn, let's talk a little bit about this case and Pirro's trouble that she's just gotten into with Trump, because it was a 20-page court filing, and as you put it, amounted to an indictment of sorts of Mr. Burgum, the contractor hired to repair the pool, Atlantic Industrial Coatings, and U.S. Park Police officials. So Pirro here essentially threw Burgum under the bus. You know, she felt like Trump now is throwing her under the bus. How is all of this going to sit with the president? Who's the last one in his ear?
Well, I just think it's super simple. Like Trump's pet theory of the case here is that this was done by vandals and not by a faulty contractor. It's a super embarrassing story for him. He doesn't want to confront the truth on this thing, which is amply documented. And by the way, Pirro's claim that she just learned that this was an issue with the contractor is contradicted by our reporting in Ashley's publication in the Washington Post. Everyone else has reported on this. So it's been out there that they've had trouble with the contractor. So I think the notion is that Trump, the thing that Pirro did is she contradicted Trump's position on this, and you just can't do that. And so Trump is going to the wall against somebody whom he previously considered to be a loyal friend and an ally.
Ashley, is it ultimately Doug Burgum who's the fall guy for this because of the no-bid contract and because of the doubling and tripling down on the vandalism theory?
So we don't know yet, but it's worth noting that Doug Burgum is doubling and tripling down on a theory that the president prefers because, as Glenn pointed out, it's less embarrassing for him. I was talking to someone this week who basically said Trump is so furious right now with Pirro that they don't think Trump will necessarily fire her tomorrow or the next day, but they said, and this is someone who has known Trump for a long time, it is unlikely that he will forget this. It will be something that is long simmering, and they think in a couple of months or after some time has passed, she may be out. You keep in mind the president, as angry as he gets with people, he often then doesn't like to get rid of them, because especially if the media is writing about it, because he believes it's giving the media a scalp. So a lot of people we've seen him push out, there's sort of an anger, some
delayed
public stories. And then, yes, exactly. It happens a bit more delayed when things have calmed down.
Lisa, I know you've read this entire filing. Jeanine Pirro knew she was not going to win this case. So was it just better for her to proactively let it go versus face the music on this?
I want to say that Jeanine Pirro's decision not to go forward with this case isn't just a matter of saving face. It's a matter of Department of Justice policy. There's a document called the Principles of Federal Prosecution, and they require that before a prosecutor brings a case, they have to internally believe it's more likely than not that an unbiased finder of fact, meaning a jury of 12 of the person's peers, will find beyond a reasonable doubt that that person is guilty of the crime. The crime here that Davy Hearn was accused of not only includes having to prove that the person willfully did some damage, but that the damage here was more than $1,000 worth and could not be attributed to another cause. And so I want to be really clear. This is not just a face-saving mechanism for Jeanine Pirro. This is somebody looking at the rules and saying, hey, wait a second. If I don't do this, I or others under my supervision could face potential discipline or at least excoriation by the bar, which is another set of her peers, right?
Yes. And you heard at the top there that Hearn, his camp, his lawyers are very concerned that he could be prosecuted for this again, targeted. Yep. He faced, I believe it was up to a decade in prison if he had been convicted on this. They're asking for the judge to dismiss this with prejudice, meaning that he would never face these charges again. How likely is that?
I think it's likely that the judge here is going to at least subject the government's motion to dismiss without prejudice to a pretty rigorous review. And in that way, Ariel, it reminds me of the Eric Adams case. I mean, let's harken back to the very beginning of this administration, where President Trump and other people working under his supervision wanted to get rid of the Southern District of New York's indictment of Eric Adams. And there, too, they went before a judge and said, we'd like to dismiss this without prejudice. The judge said, essentially, my hands are tied. Where the government no longer wants to prosecute people, I can't force them to, but at the very least, I'm going to dismiss this case with prejudice, not without. It's unfair for them to sort of hold this over his head for an unlimited period of time and to sort of be able to revive it on the basis of evidence that they're not willing to come forward with now.
I want to get to this other case in the saga of the reflecting pool that many of us had just learned about today. Sophie Dennison Gibby, a veterinarian who describes herself as, quote, rather obsessed with picking up litter. This is real. She visited the Lincoln Memorial reflecting pool back in June. She says that she noticed what appeared to be some trash floating in it, and she deigned to pick it up. Mm-hmm. Dared, I should say, to pick it up. That's when she says that U.S. Marshals then said, well, I really wish you hadn't done that. Now I'm going to arrest you. Yes, I'll read that again. Well, I wish you hadn't done that. Now I'm going to arrest you. And then she said what unfolded after that was terrifying. I mean, she was arrested, taken to a place she didn't know where she was going to go. Now those charges against her, the 3 defendants in similar situations, have all been dropped. Do they have legal recourse for the upending of their sense of sanity and life at this point? I mean, that is terrifying.
They very well might. There's a statute called the Federal Tort Claims Act. We've been talking about it a lot lately because there are some people who believe it could be used to provide recourse to some of the January 6th defendants. But basically what it says is, for the most part, you can't sue the federal government for doing wrong things against you, like assault or malicious prosecution. But there's an exemption there. Where an investigative or law enforcement officer employed by the federal government is responsible for that, you can sue for the damages that they did to you. Here, Ms. Denison-Gibby could say they either negligently or intentionally inflicted emotional distress upon me, they maliciously prosecuted me, they falsely arrested me. Those are all claims that may sound in a civil lawsuit brought by her lawyers. At the very least, she has what lawyers would call a colorable claim. I very much identify with her as a person who loves taking out the trash.
I think a lot of us like to, pick up the trash. We've all been taught that. Don't be a litter bug. Glenn Thrush, Lisa Rubin, thank you. Ashley, hang on there with me.
Welcome back. Todd Blanche has lost the support of one key Republican senator, Maine's Susan Collins. Collins now saying that she cannot support him as Attorney General because the Department of Justice has become, quote, increasingly political, and that he's taken several actions that have further eroded the department's independence. So let's just give you a reminder on the math now. Blanche can't afford to lose 2 Republicans and still get confirmed. So all eyes now turn to Alaska Senator Lisa Murkowski as well as Louisiana Senator Bill Cassidy. Now, Murkowski has a history of breaking with her party, and Cassidy lost his reelection bid to a Trump-backed primary challenger. So perhaps he has nothing to lose. But neither has yet to signal which direction they're leaning.
Nothing on Todd Blanche?
No comment.
Have you decided how you're going to vote?
No comment. Senator Murkowski, who I talked to yesterday, she's deliberating. So we know what he needs to get.
And we also, of course, don't yet know if Mitch McConnell would be willing to cast a vote at all. Joining me now, willing and able. Joining me now, MS Now's Michael Schnell on Capitol Hill. Michael Feinberg, MS Now National Security and Intelligence Analyst and former FBI agent, Assistant Special Agent in Charge, also with us, and David Drucker back as well. My thanks to all of you. Michael, let's start with you. What is the latest we've heard as to the reasoning behind Collins indicating that she will not back Blanche?
Yeah, Jonathan, we knew that Susan Collins was on the fence. She was undecided in the lead up to her announcement, but yesterday she broke her silence on saying where she stands, saying that she will vote against Todd Blanche. Essentially, it boiled down to the fact that she believes the DOJ has become too politicized and believes that Todd Blanche has taken a number of political actions that led her to this vote. She pointed out a number of items, including that anti-weaponization fund, the audit immunity, and then the DOJ recommending charges for Senators Mark Kelly and Alyssa Slotkin after they put out that video telling members of the military that they are allowed to disobey illegal orders. Now, that brought Susan Collins to her no vote. She was the first one out of the gate. But as you mentioned, there are still 2 key wild cards that we're waiting for, because if both of them vote no, that would be Bill Cassidy and Lisa Murkowski, Todd Blanche's nomination will fail. You just showed before, I spoke to Bill Cassidy this morning. He told me still no comment on the nomination. That has been his position for days now. Lisa Murkowski is now deliberating, but Todd Blanche said earlier that he's confident he will indeed get the votes. Take a listen to what he had to say just a few minutes ago.
I've been talking to Republicans and Democrats for the past several months, and I'll continue to do so. And my team has been as well. So, no, I'm not worried about what's going to happen over the next couple of days. I'm not going to do anything except continue to communicate with anybody who has questions about anything involving the department that I can answer, or me personally that I can answer.
Again, Jonathan, this is all going to come down to Bill Cassidy and Lisa Murkowski. They have not yet said how they plan to vote. So certainly Todd Blanche's confirmation, not certain just yet.
David Drucker, call me a cynic. But Republicans are very, very good at keeping their party in line. And I just do wonder if perhaps Senator Collins was, shall we say, given permission to vote no, because that vote may help her in her tough reelection fight in a purplish blue state, Maine, because GOP leadership knows Blanche has already got enough backing.
Yeah, it's interesting, although I never give politicians credit like that for being that sharp, because imagine everything else they'd get right. But yeah, it's a real freebie for Collins and a great way for her to demonstrate back home that she's willing to cross her party from time to time, because this is a real high-profile issue. And it revolves around something that has disturbed Republicans and Democrats, both on the Hill and in the country, and that's this so-called anti-weaponization fund and this sweetheart IRS deal for the president and his family. But, as you note, we often see Republicans hem and haw and grind their teeth, and then eventually, find a way to get to where the president wants them to be. Now, clearly, Todd Blanche helped with this, sort of written agreement that he wasn't going to bring back the anti-weaponization fund and the IRS deal. Obviously, the president hasn't given up on it yet. And so I don't think we can count on his confirmation. On the other hand, I think Cassidy's general silence sort of leads me to believe that he may not want to be out front and doing the president any favors, but that he may want to do John Thune a favor. John Thune has a lot of political capital with many Senate Republicans, with most of his members. And Thune being able to process this nomination, given that Todd Blanche has provided in writing to Cornyn and Tillis what they wanted regarding the fund and the IRS deal, leads me to believe that Blanche can be confirmed. Now, as Michael said, whether or not he is another story.
So, Michael Feinberg, Cornyn and Tillis had their objections, as David just said, to the weaponization fund, to this IRS deal for President Trump and his family. Blanche seems to have mollified them with some adjustments, some written documents. But we have spoken to legal experts for days now saying, well, there are significant loopholes here and that, they could be revived. And let's be clear, President Trump continues to vociferously campaign for them, saying, I want these things.
Yeah. Look, I don't know why even if what you just posited, isn't true. I still don't know why anybody would put stock in Todd Blanche's various affirmations and promises during his confirmation hearings. This is somebody who, when he was going through the process to become Deputy Attorney General, promised up and down that there would be no politicized prosecutions under his watch at DOJ. Now, perhaps he thinks he's kept that promise in some cloud cuckoo land fantasy. But I think folks like Jim Comey, Letitia James, the Broadview Six, Don Lemon, David Hearn at the Reflecting Pool, they might disagree that there's been no political prosecutions at DOJ, as might anybody who's read a newspaper in the past 18 months. So I don't think we should be taking any of Blanche's promises about the weaponization fund or about anything else with any degree of seriousness.
David Drucker, back to you for a political question. In Cornyn's, he explained his explanation for why he was coming around here. He said, I'm paraphrasing, but only barely, that there's nothing they can do to rein in the president. And as soon as he said that, I heard from a number of Democrats saying, boom, that's a line. That's an argument we're going to take because so many Americans are tired of the free reign that Donald Trump has, and that this would be a convincing argument to flip the Senate blue, to actually do their duty and provide some sort of check and balance for the chief executive.
Look, it's certainly a good message to run on, particularly because the Senate and the House, for that matter, exists in part to rein in the president, right? It's checks and balances, and Congress is the supreme branch. It's Article 1. Is this the big difference maker in some of these red states where Democrats have to win in order to take back the Senate? Unclear, just given where voters' priorities are. But this is a juicy soundbite that certainly does Republicans no favors and could boost Democrats in particular places.
All right, David Drucker, Michael Schnell, our thanks to you both. We appreciate it. Michael Feinberg, please stick around.